Hello, I want to call this meeting to order of the Antioch Cannabis Standing Committee. Roll call, please.
Thank you. Chairperson Torres Walker,
Present.
Pro Tem Freitas.
Present.
We have a quorum at 10:06. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment on items not on the agenda?
Yes, we do have one public comment, and that is Brianna Robinson. Please step to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brianna Robinson, President and CEO of Opportunity Junction. We are a nonprofit workforce development organization just up the street on Delta Fair and Summersville. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the committee, Council Members Freitas and Torres Walker, for the social equity program that is part of the Cannabis Committee. We have been a recipient of funds from Cocoa Farms since 2021, and those funds have been incredibly important in helping us launch and support our healthcare career pathway program, which helps motivated job seekers, primarily who live in Antioch, with barriers to employment, get the skills and confidence to launch careers in healthcare careers, both as certified nursing assistants and as medical assistants. So was not an agenda item that was of interest, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for the support, particularly through Cocoa Farms and our partnership. So thank you.
Thank you.
While the speaker's still here, David Storer for the record. We are having a discussion on equity that doesn't relate to your specific instance. So we could, if you wanted to do that, you could stay and hear that discussion, and I'll explain more about that. So as a point of order, while we have one member of the audience that deals with equity issues, and there may be some questions, would the committee wish to reverse the order of the items so that we could take care of that piece of business first? Your call. Thank you.
It's up to you, but I'm not recommending it, but it's up to you. That's fine. It's the second action item, the grant.
That's item 2, right?
Yes. If you want to, it's fine.
Let's, I guess, were you prepared to stay for the whole meeting?
Depends how long the meeting runs, but probably.
Why don't we move to pass consent, which is our.
I'm pulling both consent items.
You are?
Mhm.
So then, can I get a motion to suspend the rules and move up item 2 to now?
I have a question of the city attorney, Mr. Thorne. What constitutes a quorum of the committee, one member or both?
I don't know.
I'm just curious. The question was asked, and it's like, I don't know, what constitutes a quorum or not. But could we know? I mean, and this is true for all of our council member subcommittees. Let's say a meeting was called, one person here, the other person isn't. Can the business continue with one person? I think for motions, you need a motion and a second. So the question came up, and I'm just kind of curious, for a subcommittee, what constitutes a quorum?
Yeah, I'll step in because I know Scott's new here. I believe past practice has always been for a committee of 2, there would need to be both members present is kind of past practice.
If you would just check that out.
Yeah.
Okay. So are we going to bring her forward or just go through the agenda?
Well, the only way we can.
Is make a motion to.
Mhm.
I would move that we revise the agenda to take item 2.
Second.
Chair Torres Walker,
Yes.
Pro Tem Freitas.
Yes.
The motion passes 2-0. Thank you.
We're now receiving item 2, recommendation to the city council to authorize the city manager to enter into agreement with, wait a minute. Am I missing something? Oh. To enter an agreement with the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, GoBiz, to accept a grant award of $75,000 for the development of a local cannabis equity program. Anything on this presentation?
Thank you. David Storr for the record with the Community and Economic Development Department. So the word equity is obviously in the title of what we're talking about. And I'd just like to maybe take a moment to explain the different pieces of equity, and then we can just talk about the act that you could take today to recommend approval of the item. So when it comes to social equity, as we've heard, that particular piece of social equity is what I'm going to call on the back end of the process. But we're going to be talking about social equity on the front end of a process. So if I can just explain briefly what the back end is that our speaker mentioned today, is we currently have an ordinance for cannabis. And within that context, for a commercial cannabis business, we have a process where a conditional use permit is issued by the city council. And as part of that approval of the conditional use permit, there needs to be an operating agreement. So this is past tense now, so as you're going through the act of entitling a business to perform commercial activities, their provision is such that they have to come up with a plan to deal with equity issues and how we can use opportunity junction or other entities to help take funds that that business that's been authorized then uses to engage throughout the community. That's the back end side of social equity. And in that operating agreement, there are other things, not just the equity piece. We have things like odor plans, noise, security, the whole plethora of things that were in our ordinance. What this item is about is, on the front end, is addressing the ability for people that are disadvantaged or have been harmed through social equity or inequity practices, if you will, and allowing or creating a process for people that have been categorized as such to then have a method to which to apply for a business to operate commercial cannabis operations. And so the grant that was submitted to the state, and we've been told that we've been awarded or will be awarded the $75,000, is to do an assessment within our community to see if there's enough of a pool, if you will, of people that could actually apply for cannabis permits that otherwise haven't been able to because of their disadvantages, the disadvantages that have come upon them because of social equity preferences and practices and their harm. And so the recommendation from staff is for you as a committee is to recommend that the city manager enter an agreement with GoBiz in order to do an assessment of our community, determine the need, or if there's indeed a market, if you will, for people to apply for cannabis businesses that otherwise not been able to have done so already. And so this is a very simple request from you today to authorize that to occur with the city manager's office. And we are in the midst of getting that prepared for an upcoming city council meeting. So it'd be helpful if we could have that process wrapped up today and a recommendation forwarded to the city council. Be happy to answer any questions. In our Montserrat and Zach will be the ones that are spearheading this process through your council, through the council, and I'm here to answer any questions today. Thank you.
Mr. Storr, it's not going to be that simple, because one of the items I was going to pull off are the minutes that we had in April and August. And, you know, going through the minutes, and Kitty, you always do a very good job, and I appreciate it. Unfortunately, you're one of our heroes, and you never get recognized, but thank you very much. So when you go to the April 23rd minutes itself, you know, the chairperson and I spent a lot of time talking about what we wanted to do with the committee, what direction we wanted, and items that we were very, very concerned about. So when you look at the April 23rd, we talked about the ordinance itself, and, it says, following review by the Cannabis Land Use and Operational Guidelines, the Cannabis Committee provided the following direction. And I'm guessing there's about 10 or 15 directions that were provided. Then when you go to the August meeting, which, April was almost 10 months ago, August is almost 6 months ago, and again, this committee provided directions. And in here, we said prioritize updating the cannabis ordinance and guidance, guidelines to be consistent, reflecting the current state of federal requirements. I know the chairperson and I have repeatedly asked about that ordinance. And please don't talk about bandwidth, I don't want to hear it. We have made this request more than 10 months ago. And so, on this agenda, since the ordinance is not here, is it the opinion of the city attorney's office that the ordinance actually is perfect and does not need to have any revisions whatsoever?
Mr. Chair, if I can try to take a shot at some of the, sorry, Councilman.
It's a legal
Pro Tem
question.
Freitas, I understand it's a legal question, but if I can intercept so we can gather his thoughts. The, the ordinance is not before you, but because the discussion in August that I was here for was a question of there are inconsistencies between the ordinance and the guidelines that we have. And so what we've got in item number 1, which we'll now hear in a few moments, is leave the ordinance as it is. Let's take out those things that the guidelines are inconsistent and make them talk to each other. So the ordinance has done that. This item is not that issue. And so what I'm saying, I see you disagree.
I disagree.
Okay, well,
We spent hours and hours talking about the ordinance itself, not just the relationship between the ordinance and the guidelines.
okay, that is our next item. What I'm trying to discuss here, with all due respect, is we're not talking about the ordinance right now unless we want to insert something into the ordinance that addresses what we're trying to spend $75,000 on and trying to get a group of people able to apply for a cannabis license, which the ordinance will address. So we're just trying.
Social equity is a part of the ordinance.
No, it's not.
It's called out.
Again, this is the front end. What you're describing in the ordinance is the back end. That is the social equity piece is for those people that have got a business and they have to put a certain amount of their gross income to a program that we have in the ordinance, admittedly, that says how that will happen. And so we then have a process to identify people who are spending that money for a business already in operation. So we have 8 people right now, 8 operating agreements, and organizations as this are actually taking the money from the gross receipts of those businesses. We're not talking, this item for the Go Biz is over here saying there have been people that couldn't even apply to have a cannabis business in Antioch. Let's create a process for them. Let's do an assessment to see if there are people out there that have been harmed because of the practices of the cannabis industry. Let's give them incentives to come in and apply and see if that is actually going to happen. And then, let's say that person is applying. They will then go through a process of getting a use permit and an operational agreement, and then they'll be obligated to pay money to a social equity program on the back end. That's what we're trying to do today, is get you to recommend to the council that we can create that process
Well,
on
I'm
the front
not
end.
voting for it because that's not the direction of this committee. This committee said we wanted to have the social equity portion come before us. We wanted to understand the procedures. The only recipient that we know at this point is Opportunity Junction. I don't know who else gets social equity. So it has been a constant question before this committee, more than 10 months ago, to talk about the process, to talk about every business that we have and what they are doing with social equity, the procedures, the selection. So now you're saying, well, hey, we got $75,000 grant to do exactly that. We're going to take a look at it. Well, I'm not prepared to do that because I have so many questions about social equity, about its procedure. And I think, and frankly, the staff report, what are we giving? $75,000 to a consultant to go do this and come back?
That is correct.
There's no work plan. There's no budget here. I think this is premature. I'm voting no. And I will be recommending to the council an adamant no. This committee should have been informed about the social equity program. When I read the staff report, I don't even think Opportunity Junctions qualifies for anything according to the discussion section in the memo. So that concerns me greatly.
So if I could, Mayor Pro Tem Freitas, no, Opportunity Junction would not qualify to do any of this. And so what Mrs. Storr is talking about is so the Cannabis Standing Committee, since I've been appointed almost 5 years now, has been talking about this other piece of social equity that the city doesn't have. So the one piece of social equity that we do have as a city under our cannabis ordinance is that a portion of the earnings of a dispensary, they have to partner with a nonprofit, and they have to give a portion of those earnings to the nonprofit to provide services to individuals and communities that have been disenfranchised by criminalization of cannabis. When I came into council, the process was we allowed the operator to find the nonprofit on their own and then partner. And we said that was unacceptable. So we had the city actually create a process where the city would identify the nonprofits and pair the nonprofit with the operator to get the operation agreement settled so that then they can begin to operate here in the city of Antioch, and then those organizations get those funds. That's one piece of cannabis equity, and I think that's the part where you were like, well, how do we understand what's going on now? How do we know who is getting funded? Is it effective? The other piece that we haven't been able to pin down over the last 5 years is this other part of social equity, whereas jurisdictions have to provide an opportunity to stand up a program to help individuals who have been criminalized as a result of marijuana charges to be able to legally operate a dispensary. And it's the equity piece of it is that we stand up a program, we call those folks in, and then we help them become an operator. So you go from the deeply impacted and criminalized and harmed to now you can be basically in the field of cannabis. And as you stand up the dispensary, if you even qualify, then you become a contributor to that other equity program that we have. So what's being suggested today isn't something, you're right, it's not something that an Opportunity Junction would have option for, but it would be for us to be able to stand up a program for people who have been disenfranchised and actually locked out of the cannabis industry, quite frankly, since it was legalized, because they have a conviction on their background, a former marijuana conviction on their background. So it is two totally different programs. One we have and we want to assess and look at, and one we don't have, but the city went out and seeked money to stand it up. And there have, in the past, been residents who have showed up here demanding that the city actually stand up this program because they themselves were directly impacted and wanted to be able to participate in the cannabis industry in Antioch, but because we didn't have a program or a provision for it in our ordinance, it held them back.
I don't disagree with anything you said. The direction from this committee for 10 months is to have a complete, thorough review of the social equity program. As a matter of fact, in the minutes, Freitas suggested establishing a formalized process. Because as far as I can gather, it's not a formalized process. It's pretty much catch as catch can, and has been that way for 5 years. I've asked for anything in writing, and for 10 months I have not received anything in writing that would clearly articulates you know, the social equity portion. So now we're saying, okay, here's the missing piece, let's use 75,000. I'm still trying to educate myself on the whole process. And when we did the review, really, March, April, and August, it's a mess. And so coming before me and saying, gee, let's spend 75,000 when we haven't even cleaned up what exists makes no sense to me whatsoever. So I'm no on this.
I'll apologize on behalf of the department.
I'm not
staff.
asking for
Well, no, no,
apology.
we need to read the minutes, obviously. I haven't done that. I read the minutes in the context of looking for past direction, but not in April. August, when I was here, clearly the discussion was about there's inconsistency between the ordinance and the guidelines. And so we've done that. So I apologize that we haven't done the added piece of explaining through the existing process on the back end. But I would like to, you did ask a question of council, and I don't want to disrespect that question. So I'd like to make some other comments after Scott has responded.
What was the question again, please? Is the ordinance perfect as it's written?
Yes,
Which ordinance?
the cannabis ordinance.
9.5.
9.5, the entire 9.5?
And I raised the question because the chairperson and I spent, I don't know, an hour and a half at March or April meeting going through wordsmithing, raising questions, asking for clarification,
Right.
and was told repeatedly that it would be reviewed and brought back for consideration.
That's right.
So 30, I think it's 38.45, 9.5, 38.45.
So the question is it the opinion of the city attorney's office that an 8-year ordinance with lots of changes in the federal laws and state law is perfect and does not need to be revised or modified?
I'm not prepared to answer whether that opinion is the opinion of this office or not.
Okay?
I'll tell you that it's pretty darn good.
It can be great, but that's not the question,
No,
Mr. Sawyer.
but
The
the,
question
but
is,
the question was superseded by your meeting in August, with due respect. In August, we were given direction at that meeting to do certain things, and we've returned to you with that.
but the
So-
assumption is that the ordinance would be updated, revised, and when that happened, the guidelines would follow suit. That
That
was
is
clearly
perhaps-
the reason why I'm asking.
That's a missing point, and I'll apologize for that too. But the point is, we have today for you a staff report that we'll get to that talks about the changes that we've made to the guidelines to be consistent with the law. We're happy to change the law if there's something, a failure in it. I'm saying it's pretty good. This social equity program that you've got, I've not seen it in 5 jurisdictions that I've worked. I've yet to see something on the front end either. And guess what? GoBiz has said there's a need. Let's put out these grant guidelines. We applied, we got accepted to do an assessment. That's what we're trying to ask you to forward to the council is say, yeah, knock yourself out. Go spend some money to figure out if our community has a need through an assessment to get on the front end of the equity. I'd like to get on the back end because you raised the question about the back end. Opportunity Junction. Let me just give you a bit of a history lesson here. In the original operating agreements, the first few that went through your council, language was in the social equity program where discretion was given to staff to say, you may include reaching out to Victory Outreach Church. And then it got tightened up to say, let's go ahead and select Beat the Street. So there was a process after the adoption of the ordinance where you just don't leave it up to the people to come forward and just knock on the door. There's an actual process, and I think that's what you're getting to is please describe to us the process of how we make the selections, because every operating agreement, some of them said that there was no name suggested and that they could propose who the entity was. But as the last 3 or 4 have been approved by your council, you've actually said it will be given to East Contra Costa Family Justice Center. And I can tell you which ones those are for. Those were for Delta Family Farms, KWMA, and off the charts. So we've got an evolving process for how we select the people, and we will come back and describe that process for you at the next
Mr.
meeting.
Sawyer, on this agenda, on your item, under discussion, the purpose of the Cannabis Equity Grants Program for local jurisdictions is to advance economic justice for individuals most harmed by cannabis criminalization and poverty by providing support to local jurisdictions as they promote equity and eliminate barriers to enter the regulated cannabis industry for equity program applicants and licensees.
The front end. We do not have a
I don't care
process
if it's the
to,
front end or the back end. The fact of the matter is, with that definition, I don't think Opportunity Junction works. And in our first meeting, which was March, I asked for a list, because nobody could answer how many, cannabis facilities do we have. They gave us a list of 9, and only 5 provided funding. And so the question was, well, are those businesses operable? Are they working? And if they are, why haven't they provided money? Which raises the issue on social equity. If they were operating, do they have an equity program? Are they contributing? And so back in March, April, and repeated in August, and I know I've asked many times this question about social equity and how it works, and I would assume staff would come and say, there's a back end and a front end. Here is a delinquency. And, we have a way of addressing that with the $75,000 grant. But this is backward, directed. It's like, I'm still waiting to find out how many legitimate operating dispensaries do we have in Antioch? Do they pay? Is there a social equity? And who is the social equity partner? I only know one, and she's sitting here. So as a council member who has oversight responsibilities, it doesn't look good. And I'm sorry, but we did our job by raising the question. Part of the problem we have, I don't know who my staff is for this committee. Historically, it's been the city attorney's office. But then I read something about 4 or 6 weeks ago that Mr. Seal was talking about, finances and getting revenue for cannabis programs. Wow, new to me. I'm on the committee. I didn't know that was happening. And now we have a grant proposal. Wow. And so I am very concerned. I mean, we need to educate, the committee needs to be educated. We need to understand how this works, what is working, what needs to be modified, what needs to be eliminated.
Mrs. Thor, I guess I'm going to make some assumptions here. I think we probably should have taken this item after 1, if the focus of item 1 was on the ordinance. So we probably should not have moved it up. But that's neither here nor there. I guess I do have a question. How long, what is the timeline to be able to sign off and receive the grant? Is there some sort of grace period where if you don't sign off or get approval, that then the funds get pulled?
we're already ahead of the curve on that. We've already submitted the application, been notified of an award, and we've actually gone ahead and received the operating agreement. The city manager has returned it to say that we're interested in receiving the money, and then now it's to go to the council, and this is our step prior to council to say, yes, we want the manager to enter into a contract. So and that date was March 31st. We're already way ahead of that. It's after March 31st that there's a time period, and I don't recall it off the top of my head. I won't make a time up. But we're well ahead of the curve in the process to get the agreement even engaged with GoBiz.
So we do have time. We do have time.
We can come back
So
and
I want to make a recommendation because I get what Mayor Pro Tem Freitas frustration.
Hey,
I
you guy,
get what
that's okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Freitas frustration is kind of coming from. I've been here for 5 years, so I get when people were coming and talking about this program and saying we need to create options because they don't exist right now. I think the confusion is because they're both called equity programs, and our Mayor Pro Tem still doesn't feel like up to speed or no, on the equity program, because that was something that was asked to come back. I'm wondering if we can, if this will be amenable to our Mayor Pro Tem, is if we can, I don't know why I want to call you Vice Mayor. Can I call you Vice Mayor? We can,
Just to call me late for dinner, that's all I care.
I'm wondering if it's possible, because we do have some time, but we don't drag it out too close. If what could happen is that we actually bring back a full presentation of our current equity program that ties operators to nonprofit organizations. If it's clearly laid out how it used to be and how it is now, which some of us understand, like initially there was no process led by the city. Now the city not only has a process, but also has acted as an intermediary when the operators and even the nonprofits don't agree. Maybe we can get a presentation, just a full layout of our current equity program. And then it might also be helpful to stand that up next to what this equity program would look like, because it's two separate equity opportunities. They are not the same. But I think if we get a full presentation of what we currently have, stand that up next to what we need related to the ask today, then we probably could make a more informed decision in the next meeting. Hopefully we can get that scheduled soon.
That's a great idea. We could actually break it into 3 pieces, if I can just show you where my head is at. If we could do it in March, that'd be awesome, just for, because we don't want too much time. I've noticed when I was going back, looking at the minutes, the timing of when the minutes, not the content of the minutes, there's usually, like you said, 10, 6, 8 months between cannabis meetings. And so if we can get one for March, that'd be awesome, because it keeps this thing in our minds. So I was thinking of, yes, the city attorney's office creates the agendas, and we as staff will add stuff to the agendas. The one carry-on item was from the August meeting, where we were going to look at the ordinance and get the inconsistencies out of the guidelines as it relates to the ordinance. So the ordinance has not changed, or at least in the item coming up. So we will have a presentation on the actual content of the ordinance, the mechanics of the guidelines, how they relate, and then we'll have, once they're at, perhaps talk about the equity piece through the operating agreements. So message received, thank you.
And I think it would be important to make sure we're clear on the distinction between
The two.
the equity program that's being proposed today and the one that we currently have in existence. And I think it would also be important for myself and Vice Mayor Freitas to hear if there are any current challenges with our current program, any suggested changes, things like that. If we could do all of that at the next meeting in March, because we could schedule, then we can
I'd like
bring,
to schedule it before we leave.
yeah, we can bring this back, be a little bit more informed, have a little bit more information, and then we can feel comfortable moving forward. So maybe the direction is that we hold this over to our next.
Just continue this and the next item,
Yeah.
because otherwise we'll be, talking about the same things that we've talked about today on the second item for the guidelines and the ordinance. So I think we've got the message loud and clear. Let's set it up. I think a Wednesday is great at this same time. So if you can look at your calendars for Wednesday at 10 o'clock.
Next week?
We'd have to publish the agenda without the materials. It's really a matter of getting your calendars together. So I think March 18th or
Well,
25th would work for us.
wait, don't you need it to go to council for approval before the end
No,
of the month?
we can, like I was saying, we've got until March 31st to do something that we've already done. So we're ahead of what their timeline is for the first benchmark.
I can do the 18th. Can we do the 18th?
I can do the 18th. Can we meet a little earlier, though? Is that
Sure.
possible? 9 o'clock?
Would it be 9?
9? Okay. Is See, Kitty, we do read your minutes. Some of us. So on that, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, the next item is going to be the same thing. You know, it's like, you know, actually, Madam Chair, you know, she was very enthusiastic about, boy, 8 years have changed. There's been new regulations. We need to be updated. And so it's like, okay, that's fine with me. And I think, you know, for direction, and the question I have, I'm so happy the city manager is here. The question I have is this: who is our staff? Because I'm not quite sure if it's the city attorney's office, it's city manager's office, if it's community economic development. Who should we as members go to? I went to Mr. Thorne on Tuesday when I was here at City Hall, and I said, Mr. Thorne, you know, I don't
Well,
have
when
an
I-
agenda, I don't have.
Well,
a
if I could
packet.
jump in on that, and, you know, I did watch a little bit of the last meeting, the August meeting, and this was discussed with interim city attorney Derek Cole, where, you know, quote-unquote staffing, what does that mean? And is the city attorney's office staffing this? And I think it was his recommendation. And I believe that the committee agreed, but I may be wrong, that for the city attorney to quote-unquote staff this would be inappropriate due to our advisory role. So I know there was some confusion based on my understanding is that this was created by a prior city attorney, and the involvement of that city attorney probably overlapped into an area which went beyond advisory. And I think the current role now, based on my understanding from what Derek Cole said at the last meeting, was that the city attorney should stay in the advisory role and not overstep that and do things like inspections and things like that. And I was just, you know, I know the office of the city attorney is on the letterhead of the agenda, and if there's, at the last meeting, there was questions such as if you wanted to add or change an agenda item, who do you go to, the city attorney? I think the answer is no. But I think that needs to be worked out. Maybe that'll become more solidified when the next city attorney comes, you know, is in place.
What I can tell you is, because I've been here for a little while, and it's been a lot of different people.
Yeah.
But the main department that has been consistent has been economic development. So it's always been the economic development director, and the city attorney only is here in an advisory capacity.
Right,
So
and I believe
the
that's exactly what you said the last
staffing-
meeting, right?
The staff to this body is economic development with the support of the city attorney
Yes, ma'am.
providing legal advice.
That's my understanding as
That's
well.
it. So now we have community and economic development because the departments merged, which actually means our committee staff, the staff to this committee, is really from the economic and community development department.
That is my understanding
That's
as well.
the main staff. As far as equity, because the community resource department is connected with the nonprofits and had the best reach into the community, took the lead on the equity program, the cannabis equity program, and worked with the economic development director to bring those items to this committee.
I think that's confusing, and especially since we talk about two parts of equity. And so, I mean, as a committee member, as a council member, normally there's one person, and I know that David Sweet attended one meeting, which I took was going to be the staff person from Community Economic Development. Okay, and so I know we got scheduled. We didn't have an agenda, we didn't have a packet, and it's like, well, who do I go to, you know? So poor Mr. Thorne was in his office, and I went to him because I wasn't quite sure who I was supposed to go to. So I would ask, when we have this next meeting, please, you know, let us know. And since we're talking about the next meeting, the original questions that we had in March are still questions. How many cannabis businesses do we have in Antioch? Are they in compliance with our ordinance? how much revenue has been generated? We ended last fiscal year as a committee. We have no idea how much revenue was generated from cannabis businesses for fiscal year 24-25. We're now 8 months into the new fiscal year, 25-26. We still don't have any idea what is happening. And we've been very consistent. How many businesses are here? Are they operating? What do they contribute? And that information still needs to come to the committee. We need to be informed, you know, about what is happening. The whole, let's face it, there are problems and, you know, with this whole business. And I think the chairperson and I from the very beginning said, let's clean it up. Let's make it rational and logical and move forward. We're still, you know, after all these months, still in that phase. I'd like to get out of that phase. And if that means that we meet more regularly, fine. We meet more regularly. But, you know, it is very frustrating as a council member not to know who my staff person is. And so I just need clarification, you know, of if we have questions or we, you know, need advice or whatever, who that person is.
It's me.
Oh,
There's your answer.
poor guy.
Not trying to be flippant, but we ought to, if we're going to have a meeting and maybe not do the second item or the first item, whichever way you want to look at it, we might want to open it to the public for comment.
Before we move on, can I just add a couple things? Is there a public
It
comment?
don't
I'm
look
sorry.
like there's public comment.
No public comment, thank you.
Okay. So to go back a couple questions, 2 people here are required for a quorum being majority, 1 won't do.
Thank you.
Secondly, the reason why I asked about, you know, is there a specific part of the ordinance that you want the city attorney's office to evaluate is because I doubt that the committee's belief is that the entire ordinance is in question. Is there something that you want an answer to regarding the ordinance?
Mr. Thurman, the whole ordinance.
The entire ordinance.
Entire ordinance
is
needs to be
lawful.
reviewed to see if we're in federal compliance, state compliance, and if things, you know, because of experience, do we need to modify the ordinance? I mean, it is 8 years old. And, you know, the law passed in 2016. Antioch approved it, I think, in 2018. Kevin is the kind of historian, you know. And so I have to believe that there have been changes. And so it's a review. It's to go through, clean up the document, see if it's current, usable. If the city manager or community and economic development department, you know, wants changes to the ordinance, then you know, make recommendations. I mean,
So I could weigh in real quick. Are we on item 1 now? Are we back to it?
No.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
we're still
I'm
on,
trying,
we're
we're
still on
still
item 2.
on item 2.
Okay.
but
I can weigh in on some
think-
ordinance questions when we get to item 1 then.
And okay, people, I'm trying to run this agenda. I don't know where we at now.
2.
Okay, we're on item 2, and there was direction. We're going to hold item 2 over to the March 18th meeting. Was it 18th or 19th? 18th. To the March 18th meeting, where there will be at 9 a.m., and there will be at least 3 subjects addressed from what I heard from Mrs. Storr. Equity program as it is, equity program that we do not have, but what that would look like, and the ordinance. Was it the ordinance too, or
Yeah,
did
we're
I
going
miss
to have
it?
the ordinance discussion about what it has, what it doesn't have, and if there needs to be modifications to it. Then we were going to have a discussion of the guidelines and how they relate, which is really item number 1 on the agenda tonight. And then we'll have a discussion about the current social equity program for operating, that's included within the rubric of the operating agreements.
Nice, all of that.
As well as how many businesses are operating in our community.
Yes.
Are they up to date with their financial obligations to the city? I'd love to know if there's other social equity partners. I have no idea.
Yeah, I
beyond
just
opportunity.
listed off a few of them, but yes, we'll include that, Mr. Freitas, in the staff report when we talk about the guidelines and how many businesses. Like you said, we do know that. We know how many have applied. We also know how many of that universe that are not operating and those that have closed the door since. Thank you. We'll provide all of
I
that.
know in 2024, we had quite a few, and we had people come and actually present here and at the council meeting. So the pool is a lot bigger since 8 years ago. There are quite a handful of organizations.
had a
So
total-
maybe it'd be
yeah.
good to know.
We had about 15 of them, of which I
Yeah.
think is about half of that actually operating with operating agreements. And then we'll go into those that are actually current
Yeah.
on their payments and how much we've received prior fiscal year and year to date. We have that
Nice.
information.
All right. The, the agenda item we're on now is consent, which are our meeting minutes. Is there any public comment for this, or any public comment? Any,
No public comment, thank
No,
you.
This is-
all right.
Madam
Motion
Chair,
to approve the
since
minutes?
I'll move the consent calendar.
Second,
Chairperson Torres Walker,
yes.
Pro Tem Freitas,
Yes.
motion passes to approve the minutes, thank you.
I know we are, now in agenda item 1, modifications to cannabis business land use operational guidelines. And can go ahead and present,
Yeah.
and then we'll take public comment, and then we will talk about why we probably won't address this today.
Sure. So first off, I'd like to apologize. I was not aware of the April meeting and the direction provided. I was only involved in the August meeting, and this item reflects what we had discussed there. We had talked about what has happened over the years is the cannabis ordinance was adopted in 2018, and it's had subsequent updates throughout the years. I think the most recent update was in 2021. But what didn't happen during that time was the guidelines were never updated to reflect those changes. But one of the issues with the guidelines was we were restating standards in the municipal code in the guidelines, which basically accounts for that confusion. So what this cleanup is doing is it's removing all of those standards out of the guidelines because they're not guidelines, they're codified standards in our municipal code. So there's no reason to restate them in the guidelines. So what we're doing is we're gonna attach a copy of the current ordinance to the guidelines as a packet when you hand to potential cannabis applicants. So the guidelines will be strictly the guidelines, which, as we talked about last time, the guidelines are typically put into as conditions of approval. So once you become operating, they're no longer a guideline, they're a standard. What the flexibility does with the guidelines is it allows us to evaluate different types of cannabis businesses that maybe these guidelines don't necessarily need to be implemented. I will say I don't think we've had an instance of that during our time here. We're almost always folding the guidelines into standard conditions of approval. But one example would be if we ever say got like a cannabis testing lab in the community or something like that. All of these operational guidelines for retail or cultivation necessary for, say, like security or something like that, those might not be necessary to arm security guards, at a cannabis testing facility. They could be. But the way we're using the guidelines is that gives us that flexibility when we're reviewing these applications with our police department to potentially make modifications. And what I'll say is if we ever do make a modification and maybe don't include a guideline as a condition of approval, we're gonna call that out in the staff report that goes to council and give our explanation why, hey, this guideline wouldn't necessarily apply or why we're modifying it. But ultimately, the council would have the discretion whether to approve that modification, or they could say, upon review, no, we want this as a condition of approval. So regardless of whether it changes from a staff standpoint, council is always going to hold discretion over whether these are folded into as conditions of approval. So the cleanup really is going to help us when we do make future updates to the ordinance if we need to. We're not having to update guidelines because these things live in two different places. So that's what's before you now. That was kind of what we had talked about at the August meeting. Regarding the April meeting, I'm kind of reading through the minutes here. From the land use standpoint, I'm happy to answer some of these questions you had at the time. I've been involved in this since 2018. Got a lot of cannabis experience now. And then one thing I will also add, I know all the current operating businesses in the community, they have these guidelines as conditions of approval, so they are standards. And I don't think we've received a cannabis application besides the recent one for Cocoa Farms, which was a slight modification to a licensing requirement. We haven't received a dispensary application in probably 4 or 5 years. So we really haven't been interacting it from that standpoint. It's more, I think, on the continued operations and dealing with the current operators. So, but I'm happy to answer questions. I know you had a lot of questions in April that if I was here, I may have been able to answer some of them. So I'm happy to be a resource today and answer some questions you might have regarding the ordinance.
Madam Chair. So, Mr. Scudero, you know, reading your staff report, and so philosophically, you know, guidelines are important to me from the perspective of a layperson, so that I don't have to hire an attorney to, you know, read the ordinance, you know, and interpret it and meet with, you know, city attorney to make sure the interpretation's correct and things of that sort. So that's kind of my bias when I was going through here. The guidelines are, you know, more of the easier way to understand the rules and regulations of government, because let's face it, government regulations can be very difficult. And so that's my bias. So looking at attachment A, the background, the one that immediately that came out for me was the fees. Now, we don't have the fee stated in the ordinance.
No, the fee stated in our master fee schedule. So
Yeah.
it is a use permit. It's a deposit. So it's a $2,000 deposit, and we bill staff time to work on the projects.
So if an individual came to the counter, you're assisting this individual, you know, you give them a copy of the master fee schedule and say it says you owe us $2,000. I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
where that how is that knowledge that he owes or she owes $2,000?
So the way the process works, when someone approaches us regarding opening a cannabis business in the city of Antioch, you know, at a counter, if it's just a informal counter discussion, yeah, we're going to say, if they ask, when we talk about fees, it's a $2,000 deposit. It's also stated in our application. It lists.
It does list.
Yeah, it listed in the
Okay,
application.
I mean, as
Yeah.
long as it's listing.
Yeah, and
it's-
then
It's clearly understood.
yeah, it's in the application, and then obviously, you know, with these, we're having pre-application conferences with the applicant as well as planning staff and police department staff, and there we have the more robust discussion going through guidelines, city expectations, fees, how that works, monthly invoices, paying for staff time to work on the project.
Okay. I guess attachment A existing is how I would say this. So under, purpose and applicability, then under security, and Mr. Thorne may have an opinion here too. Number one, cannabis businesses should provide adequate security. Well, that was a red flag for me. Adequate? You know, I mean, and I'm not so much into wordsmithing, but to me, appropriate security may be more so that the police department or community development department or the city attorney's department, I mean, adequate just seems like we're dumbing this down to the lowest common denominator.
So every applicant has to submit a security plan for review and approval by the Antioch Police Department. We don't attach that plan to the public agenda item that goes before council because it is kind of a sensitive document, and it basically details a lot of their security protocols. So it's a robust, I would say the most significant part of the land use entitlement process with the cannabis businesses is the security plan, the review of the police department. I think, you know, when we first started this in 2018, we took what I would say, because this was new to everyone, you know, it was new to us, it was new. Captain Moorfield, one of our previous captains who since retired, was the lead from the police department. And I would say we took an overly conservative approach to security, just because, you know, this was new to us. So I think if you probably ask the cannabis businesses today, the ones I've talked to, they feel actually our security requirements are probably too much with regards to armed security. But that was the part that we had the most significant discussions, because a lot of it was us learning from these operators. And one thing we also learned when we were meeting with them was, as much as we want a secure facility, they have a lot of self-interest into having a secure facility as well.
Right. It just,
Yeah, I was gonna, can I add to what Kevin just said, please, in response to your question? So there's two bites at the apple for the city council on the issue of security, noise, odor. That's when you go through the land use process of the conditional use permit, public hearing, and those documents are in there to a point. As Kevin said, you don't lay out the actual plan and how many armed guards you're gonna have and that kind of thing. So that's one crack when you give the entitlement away. As a condition of approval, as Kevin was saying, it's also contained in the guidelines, you have the piece that then says, oh, by the way, you also have to have an operating agreement. And within that operating agreement that comes before the council, that'll also be that detail that you want to see.
Okay, so adequate, just to me, didn't seem strong enough, but staff is saying you're happy with it. Okay.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, I check in regularly with Captain Bittner regarding the operations, and for the last 8 years, we've really had little to no incidents related to security for the cannabis businesses.
But we also know from Mr. Bittner that after the initial application, the police department never goes in, and even in the ordinance, it talks about the police department going in on an annual or basis to check everything out, and they don't.
Yeah, I believe they had been starting to restart that with when Brett Sweet was here, and then he's obviously since left the city, so we can kind of look into picking that back up. I believe he was taking the
I
lead
think
on
the
that.
committee was a little alarmed that the only time the police department gets involved is at application, and now we're 8 years down the road. It's like, you're saying you don't go back and check once in a while?
I spoke with Captain Bittner about that very thing because I was going through the operating agreements. There's more than just the annual review. There's audit provisions that we can have.
Right.
And so in response, Captain Bittner, and this is a complaint-based thing, as with most of our code enforcement, his people are in touch with those people that are operating. It's whether he has a formal, hey, I'm coming in 2 weeks kind of a thing. We don't do that. And so his officers do have a pulse on what's going on.
So, Mr. Storer.
And we could actually change the ordinance to do something like that.
Well, it's kind of, it's a legal question, Mr. Thorne, now this is public information, so we know that on a regular basis, even though the ordinance calls out that we have not done it for 8 years, and so the question to me is a liability question. If something should happen, is the city liable?
It depends. And just to clarify, we moved on from security, we're talking about checks now. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure.
Yep. Okay. It depends. If we create a duty, and it could be, and a special relationship is developed where a check would create liability, that could be the case.
So again, I don't want the public to think that we've not been to the operators that have been operating since day one. We do go by there. We have staff checks. I've been to 6 out of 8 of them already myself, with and without police escort. So when a
But
police,
is anybody documenting it?
it's in our
Because
emails to one, we
If
don't have a,
something were- If something were to
well,
happen.
I wouldn't want to publish it anyway.
No, I mean, it's an internal document.
Sure.
But if something happened, a liability claim, I mean, the first question the city attorney's gonna ask you is, where's your documentation?
We can certainly provide that for the last 8 months.
Sure.
Because we've been involved with that. And I do want to let the public know, obviously, rest assured that we are on top of how many we have, where the operating agreements are, what the status is, and we know when we've been out there. So we can provide that, perhaps in confidential communications to the legal counsel and then to yourselves as
Yeah,
counsel.
to me, it's a liability question. The city attorney's office need to review it and feel comfortable with it. If they said,
So
Mr. Freitas, we feel comfortable with it, that's fine with me. I don't wanna have the exposure. I want to eliminate as much exposure as we possibly can. If there was, let's say, a robbery that happened, in a cannabis, since it's an all cash business, and somebody were to be injured or whatever, I'm sure a lawsuit would be filed, and there'd be discovery. So I'm just asking, to protect the city. I'm happy to hear what you've said, but it doesn't help us unless it's documented.
And just to be clear, I was speaking hypothetically regarding a special relationship being established. In the absence of that, there would be no duty to provide security or protection to the public or prevent robberies or anything of that nature as far as civil liability.
Okay. So number 5, this is an issue that has come up, Mr. Scudero. The camera should allow for remote access to be provided to the Antioch Police Department. When we had public testimony from Captain Bittner, we don't do that.
Yeah, and
Is
actually,
that changing?
no, and that's something that's something I probably should have recommended removing from these guidelines. In the early meetings we had, the police department, they did not want remote access for a couple reasons. One, they don't have the staffing to monitor it. And 2, they don't want to give the impression to the cannabis facilities that they're kind of their security monitor. So I know that's something that I would probably actually recommend striking out as part of this as well. It's there is, I think, where they were worried about taking on a liability of, hey, we have access, therefore we're monitoring your premises like an alarm company, which they're certainly not.
This is exact
Yeah.
discussion we had before, and I saw it again. I'm
Yeah,
thinking,
I should have
thought-
redlined that
I thought
one.
we were deleting this.
Appreciate you checking that.
So I'm just, just raising.
So let me be counterpoint on this one. In all of the ordinances that I've worked on, and I've worked on about a dozen of them, you keep that in there to keep the folks honest. Whether you have the resources to implement it, having that ability to go there, and the same with auditing too. You can walk in there anytime you want and request an audit. And so keeping those people on their toes, other than saying, hey, we don't need an audit, we don't need security, we don't need odor control, we don't need noise, you load up your ordinance. So
So, Mr. Short, the common denominator is, we don't do either.
Yeah.
We don't do audits, we don't go in.
What I'll say regarding the cameras, this is an example where we had a guideline that it turned out was one that we didn't want to implement. Therefore, you won't see a condition of approval on the, it likely wasn't full. I have to go back and look. It's been a while since we've done a cannabis use permit. But it's typically not put as a condition of approval requirement because the police department did not want remote
No,
access.
I mean, that was our discussion. I was
Yeah.
just, I was just surprised to see it in black and white. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. And still on item number 5, security video must be standard industry format to support criminal investigations and should be maintained for 60 days. And so when the police department has informal or formal reviews of the businesses, that is a question that needs to be answered. I mean, are they keeping the tapes for 60 days?
Yeah, that would be definitely part of any security inspection.
Right. And then the other, and this came up in our discussion, on item number 6, cannabis operators should also identify a local contact who will be responsible addressing security and safety issues. And we discussed this a lot, and it was deficient. We don't have contacts, for the police department, emergency services, and things of that sort. So I think it's a great condition, I think it's a great guideline, but if it's not implemented, it creates a problem.
So
Well,
I know.
I thought you said that somebody from the police department is in communications with
Yeah,
the
so
dispensaries
so basically-
as a point of contact. If they
we actually have that box in the operational agreement. So there is a name of point of contact in the operational agreements.
Okay.
And we make sure it's updated, right?
In our annual review, yes.
That annual review, boy, lots of things happen there. And then on item number 11, inspections, all cannabis committee business premises should be accessible upon request to an authorized city employee or representative for random and/or unannounced inspections. Okay, do we do that? Do we have somebody that's designated in city staff?
I mean, the way I read that is, should we need to do an inspection, they have to allow us access. It's not necessarily a requirement for us to be doing random inspections.
Okay. And so, on that page, at the very bottom, under section 15, Mr. Cisquero, location and separation, you're recommending that all be deleted?
Yes, because that all lives in the municipal code.
Okay. That sometimes is difficult to understand.
I'm sorry? Oh,
Okay, I did have a question. Let's see, this is under cultivation. I think it's the new 21. It talks about the pesticides. The cultivation of cannabis must be conducted in accordance with all applicable federal, state, local laws and regulations, blah, blah, blah. Do we check that? I mean, I'm thinking for employee health. I mean, do we have that expertise?
We
I mean, I
don't.
think it's a great provision.
Yeah.
I do, to protect the employee, but if we never are checking it, doesn't help that employee very much.
Yeah, we do not have any staff that would be able to do those inspections.
It talks about compliance with the California Fire Code. So could this be a fire inspection kind of thing?
It could be, and we can reach out to Contra Costa Fire. I know when the cannabis first started, given the ambiguity between the state and federal laws regarding cannabis, I know the health department really wasn't touching it at all.
Yeah.
Fire looks at it from more of a life safety issue regarding if they are doing cultivation, sprinklered systems, things like that.
We also have our building official that does
Yeah.
that as well,
Do they do annual? I mean,
along with the other annual inspections, yeah.
Well, no, but this is really for the employee's sake. I mean, they're not chemists. And it's like their health should, in my opinion, their health should be protected.
It's like a health permit for food vendors. I mean, we actually don't, we ask them to show a certificate when we enter the building, but we do that on occupancy.
You know, and I would like it similar to, say like the gypsum plant out on Wilbur. They obviously have a lot of federal, state regulations relating to health and safety. It's not anything that we as a city enforce.
Okay. Under cannabis retail, there's their bullets. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. One of the bullets, I think the third one down, smoking or ingestion of cannabis products on site are discouraged. Yeah, really? It is proposed there should be a complete description of the operation included. Does this mean like having, I don't know, for no better, a smoke room or something? I mean, what?
So I believe it was written this way because there are certain jurisdictions that do allow what's called, I believe, cannabis cafes. I think the state has changed that law. We don't allow those. So this is an example where it's written as a guideline, but if you see any condition of approval, it says no consumption on site.
So you handle it at
Yes, at condition of
all
approval
right,
level.
thanks. And the last bullet, drive-through? Drive up and walk up, window service
Yeah.
is strongly discouraged?
Again-
I would hope so.
Another instance where when you review the conditions of approval, they are prohibited.
Okay, all right. That's all for me, I think, on this. Okay. So again, this got confusing. There were like 2 attachment A's and 2 attachment B's. I mean, it got a little confusing. So this one has attachment A, but it's 9-5.3845. Yeah, I know. And so just there's an A and a B.
Yeah, so there was 2. The first document, the attachment A was the red line version, so you can see what was being struck out.
Right.
And then attachment B is the clean version, what would be the ultimate end document should council approve the modifications.
So in the coded section that I just read, there's 1 and 2, and so providing a public outreach and education program. Do the cannabis do that? I have never seen anything. Of course, I'm probably not one of the ones they reach out to, but I've never seen anything. Public, it's like smoking or the Cancer Society, providing a public outreach and education program.
Yeah, so that's probably more in the operating agreements, which I really haven't been
It's
involved
in
in.
the code.
Right, I think it's in reference to the, oh, sorry, let me take a look.
Those are items that are in the operating agreement that are to be
Yeah.
presented to the council.
So let me just ask, for the existing businesses, do they have a public education program and outreach?
I'd have to defer to the equity partner within the city to do that. I think a lot of them do. A lot of them will have exit packaging as well, where they educate youth, things like that, flyers that they put in the materials as they walk out the door. But that's just one component of an actual program. We can
Well,
check.
because they say prior to operating in the city and as a condition of issuance of the use permit, the operator of each cannabis business shall enter into and maintain compliance with operating agreement, set forth the terms and conditions. Such requirements of the cannabis business operator shall include.
So when you issue the operating agreement, those are part of those pieces that you'll look at before you grant the operating
Yeah,
agreement.
but I mean, the question is,
Are they maintaining it?
we'll
report back on
any
that.
of them doing it?
We can report back on that too.
Okay. The other is, of course, number 2, implementing and maintaining a social equity program. And then, I think, let's see. Why did I mark that? Oh, number 8, compliance with city's requirement for periodic review and audit of the cannabis business operations and related matters. I know that's open-ended, but again, in this discussion, I think we're finding that a lot of that is not done, and I don't think that's particularly the right approach. So, oh, and let me, this is probably a legal question. Number 11, assignability. So, it's in the code, and I know, since I've been here for a little bit, some of these businesses, they change their name and somebody else is hired. Is that what that means? Assignability?
I haven't researched how it's used in this context, but the term to assign is to, as you described, to have somebody else basically manage what you've been contracted to do or permitted to do.
So it's pretty much a legal, procedure and process.
Assignment is, yes.
I mean, they're not going to, arbitrarily and capriciously, assign it. And I assume that your office gets involved.
If there is,
I don't know.
No, I'll say typically when operators change hands, that new operator needs to go before council and be approved for a new
Okay.
operating agreement.
Yeah, that's part of the operating agreement, and I think there's only like maybe 1 or 2 that we've looked at that have actually gone through that process. I think one of them's changed name 3 times.
Yeah, and what that does is it gives the council discretion beyond just the land use entitlement. It lets them review who the actual operator is. Because the land use entitlement runs with the land, but you still have discretion over the operator should that change
I
hands.
mean, the safeguard is it comes to the council for
Yes.
approval. That's fine. Okay, so, Madam Chair, that's all.
I know the public education one is often really hard for dispensaries. 1, they're not always welcomed in community. 2, we want them to educate young people on cannabis while also not wanting young people being associated with cannabis. So it's kind of difficult to understand how the the operator themselves would do that public education, given that we actually don't, the argument is that we do not want young people exposed to cannabis, but then we want them to educate young people on cannabis. And so so I'm also just wondering, is some of that public education being done through the equity partnerships? And I know somebody here is here from Opportunity Junction. Would you be willing to let us know, do you do any of that education with the partners cannabis partners you have?
I've never heard of that component of the contract, and so Opportunity Junction does not participate in that right now.
Okay. I think it would be important for, it is a requirement, and I have seen operators struggle with this, mostly because of some of the things I mentioned here.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be nice, maybe if the Department of Community Resources can talk with the operators and some of the equity partners and try to get folks together to see what a public education campaign could look like. Because I'm also not sure, because it's like,
Well, it's like cigarette companies, they're required to do some,
yeah, and we want them to do public
we want them to
education.
do it.
So we want them to do it, but then it's like we also don't want them to have access
Right.
to the people who are most at risk of potentially, having access. to tobacco, alcohol, any drugs. So I think this could be something that we could figure out collectively to make sure they're in compliance.
So if I can just read some language to support what you just said out of an actual sample operating agreement, they're pretty much almost the same, all 15 of them, or 5 or 9 of them that I think. So there's a paragraph B that says the operator shall prepare a written social equity program, quote unquote equity plan, which includes an equity program description and an action plan with goals, tasks, responsibilities, timelines, and measurable outcomes. The equity plan shall be set forth in Exhibit D. So in Exhibit D to each of these operating groups, that is spelled out. Attached hereto and incorporated herein. The operator shall provide an annual report to the city manager and city attorney on its progress in carrying out the equity program's goals and measurable outcomes. Upon request of the city manager or city council, city attorney, operators shall also agree to provide a presentation to the city council on the equity program's goals and measurable outcomes. The equity plan may be modified in writing by request of the operator and approval of the city manager and or the city attorney. So we have a lot of these. Maybe what we should do is also in that presentation, when we talk about equity, is talk about the operating agreements, because there's mechanisms I think I'm hearing them interested in.
Well, we've had the latter. We've had the operator and the equity partner come here and present and talk about what they do and what they've been doing with the equity dollars and how they're used and the outcomes they propose. We've done the latter. I think the question that I'm having is around how do we find a happy median around the public education process, because they are supposed to be doing that. Which is why I asked the question, like, is some of that being defaulted to the equity part? Because if I'm funding a nonprofit equity partner, then, like, my expectation would be that, like, my equity partner would also be a public education partner to help the individuals who are participating in the programs that I'm funding by way of this operation agreement, would be assisting with some public education to those populations around, you know, the health impacts of the cannabis, whether it's environmental, you know, or physiological. So I just think that I don't understand how they're doing it on their own, and I don't understand why they're not doing that public education with the equity partners, which is why I think it would be good for the Department of Community Resources to actually, like, have some of those conversations and see if we can see what the plan is. Because what you just mentioned was, yes, they have to provide the partnership with the equity partner in the annual report. Of course, they have to do that. But they have not been doing the public education piece.
So I'll read to you from Contra Costa Farms Exhibit D, which is the one that I read earlier defers to. The first bullet is targeting the children of Antioch residents that have been incarcerated for any reason, with such children also being Antioch residents. So we're aware of the issue. It's supposed to be in the equity plan. It's in the operating agreement. It says the goal of the program, the equity program, is to provide a level of resources and support that is not generally available by traditional social services. And accomplishing this by partnering with, specifically called out in Antioch, charities such as Beat the Street. So it doesn't actually name Beat the Street. It names it, but it doesn't say this shall be your partner. Again, we can report back on that. And then there's also a specified dollar amount. It says that in the event that a suitable partner is not available, Contra Costa Farms will form its own 501c3 for charity purposes in order to provide this level of support and resources for these children. So we've got the mechanisms. We just need to do better as staff to tell you what's in all of these agreements and the mechanism and the key points.
Madam Chair, just on that point, I think this would be another topic between the joint committee of the school district and the city. You know, once we determine, you know, what is required and the resources, I can't think of a better partner than a unified school district to reach out to to school children, but there may be some other 501c3s as well.
Yeah. I mean,
suggested.
I definitely agree. I don't know if I would use the language target children as a
Educate
as a cannabis operator. I don't know if I would want to hear you targeting my children, but language is semantics. But I think that might be a good idea
Yeah, just
as
a
well.
suggestion.
All right.
So, Madam Chair, this came up earlier, and I appreciate the minutes being so thorough, but I would go back, and, because the subcommittee takes this responsibility very, very seriously, and I think that, number one, we need to meet more often than what we have had. But if you look at the April 23 minutes, excuse me, we talked about the 200-foot, separation, and how it was inconsistent between the ordinance and between the guidelines.
Right, and that's what we propose to clean
Right.
up here, yeah.
So the other is, some of these definitions of excessive demands for police services, public outreach and educational program, administrative and penalty fees, because I don't know what those items basically mean. Process for the following: auditing and verifying payment and reporting fees. I mean, it's still an issue for me, monitoring and auditing the security plan, administering and auditing, tracking and monitoring. I mean, there are a lot of things that are in here, and I made the suggestion, since this is a program that does generate revenue, it may need a dedicated individual, to actually, follow up on that. And I think it's critical because the amount of money being generated is substantial. Then on page 2, then we go through a whole list: identify cannabis consultants, the master fee schedule, that's one of my favorite topics. Are these fees and charges and assessments, are they current? And so on. And I would just suggest on the April minutes, that staff takes a look at them, because frankly, at I think the end, I guess it's in the, at the end on page 505, we asked for a tour. I'm still waiting to go on a tour. I've only been to one, and it's the old Antioch Rexall right here on G Street and 3rd. It's tour the facilities, social equity review, the process, the revenue generation, scheduling a meeting with the operators and social equity partners to gather feedback, discussion on oversaturation that keeps on coming up in the community. And then, what is the community education program? Again, tour the cannabis, businesses, social equity. So you've heard from both of the members here. And I would just simply go back, as my expectation is still what is written here, that we will go on a tour, and that we will bring the operators together and things of that sort. And that's also true, for the minutes of the August. And, the synergy between the ordinance and guidelines, you pretty well addressed it. But, and so on down. I just simply would suggest that you look at the March, April, August, and today, and just come up with a list, because that is still my expectation of things that are going to happen. I think just a whole lot has fallen through the cracks. And, I'd like to change that.
Can I ask for some, because I wasn't at that meeting, so like, when you say identify cannabis consultants, what was that in regards to?
I forget what the issue there. I think there were some, let's see, I think those are really the 501c3s,
Okay.
and things of that sort. Who would be eligible, because we very clearly talked about eligibility.
Okay.
I think the term is consultants, but
Okay, I know there's a reference in the guidelines to staff reserving the right to utilize consultants to process applications, so I wasn't sure if that was what it was in regards to.
yeah, I don't recall.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Well, thank you. And do we need a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Madam Chair Torres Walker,
Aye.
Pro Tem Freitas. Thank you. The motion passes to adjourn at 11:30. Thank you.
you.